Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast. Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching. I'm Katie.
And I'm Elena.
And Elena, this is the day we are going full woo-woo spirituality. I'm super excited.
Oh, we had to do it. We've been hinting at it for so many episodes, and then we're like, why don't we just go all in and talk about it? So yeah, I'm excited. I mean, to be clear, I don't think we're going to be sharing any clear goals with this episode. It's more just a space for us to talk about what we find so interesting about the relationship between spirituality and the sports we do. So I'm excited to just be a little curious and just talk.
Yeah, I am too. And I think sometimes we actually get our best insights when we do that. So I have high hopes. But yeah, today's episode is called Endurance as a Form of Spirituality. And I think if you've been listening along for a while, a lot of the time we'll say something like, this is a little bit woo-woo, but ... But it seems like there are so many parallels between spirituality and organized endurance sports that we thought we would just talk about it. But before we do that, I think we should jump in with some coaching and training insights. So Elena, what has been going on with you recently?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple insights this week. I think the first is we do often talk a lot, and I feel like anyone who's listened along for a while is very familiar with the 80-20 approach of zone 2 and higher effort. And we don't talk a whole lot about the moderate effort. And I do want to just come back in and be a little bit of a fangirl for the longer moderate effort, because I think that there's a lot of power in it for a couple of reasons, both physically and mentally. This is not to say that you should only be doing your moderate efforts and forget zone 2. I'm still a huge zone 1, zone 2 fan, and of course building speed on the top end. But there is something about throwing in just like a one longer moderate effort every couple weeks or so, where it's giving your body time to adjust to a little bit of a higher effort and get more efficient at running at that higher effort. And I have seen, at least in myself and in some of the athletes I coach, more, I would say, like non-linear jumps after introducing some of these efforts. So just a reminder, if you're out there doing a lot of zone 2 and maybe throwing in some speed work every once in a while, let yourself go out for that long run and push it a little bit harder every once in a while. And I think that, one, it makes you feel physically strong to be like, oh man, I'm actually like pushing this and it feels okay and I can keep it up. But it's kind of like a good semi building into early season race pace effort. Like you're not at your race pace yet, but you're like getting there and it feels kind of empowering. And then also I think it has some big physical bumps from that as well. So big fan of the longer moderate effort. Throw it in there if you haven't already.
And actually, can I jump in on that? I'm curious, Elena, when you talk about the moderate effort, would you say this is tempo? Like where is this in terms of perceived exertion or heart rate if people want to try it out?
Yeah, I would say fully tempo. Tempo is in I would say zone 3. Like you're not at your threshold. This is something that you could theoretically sustain for, a couple hours if you wanted to. I have, I guess, more familiarity doing it as a longer run. So, going out and doing 12 plus miles at a little above my zone 2, but also not stressing it. Like if I'm feeling that I'm going too hard, then I back it off. It just means that I'm not so concerned about it staying under my zone 2 threshold. And I usually find that I can find a nice, comfortable spot in that tempo zone 3 area that feels sustainable for that long time, but it doesn't feel like I'm just chilling in zone 2. So
awesome. That's super helpful. Thanks for letting us know. And I feel like too, this is actually a lot of what our sort of marathon long run workouts will end up looking like, is like a good amount of time in that sort of Z3 tempo area. So it's good to be trying it out, especially if maybe that's your eventual goal race. You can see a little bit what that training is going to look like.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's probably the sweet spot for marathon training. So that was one. And then the other is a little cliche because we talk about it a lot, but really trusting the process of training. And part of that is taking those unplanned rest days. I found that, we say everyone probably needs more rest, but I had an experience earlier this week where I had 2 days in a row where my legs felt like they could barely move. And I've also been building training, so that's probably like a delayed effect of that. And I decided to take one full unplanned rest day and then came back feeling so much stronger. And it actually surprised me how much better I felt after that rest day. And it's reminding myself of something that I've learned time and time again, is just to trust that, even though in the moment it feels so frustrating. So just a reminder, if you're feeling just dead, you have a couple days where you're just this did not feel good, just take the rest day, especially in the winter. I don't think there's that many goal races that are happening in the next couple of months. This is your period to build, but build in a sustainable way and help your body recover from a very active season. So take those unplanned rest days, and I think it will lead to some more nonlinear jumps down the road. So I guess the theme of my insights this week is little tools to have potentially nonlinear breakthroughs.
I love that. These are super, super good little tools. And actually, the theme on rest days will segue us nicely into one of my coaching and training insights, but that's actually gonna be the second one. The first one is I had an athlete comment at their training piece recently about really just like not feeling good in one particular workout and trying to figure out what the answer is. Like, why did this not feel good? And I think when you don't feel good in any given workout, it's definitely worth trying to drill into why that might have been the case. But something that I always encourage my athletes to remember is called the rule of thirds. And maybe we've talked about it on a podcast before, but I think this is not something that Alexi Pappas made up, but she talks about it a lot in her book, Bravey, and I like the way that she thinks about it. So the rule of thirds in the endurance context is the idea that if you're at the right level in terms of your training load and how you're approaching things, probably about a third of your workouts are going to feel amazing, a third are going to feel like fine, and a third are probably going to feel bad. And so if you have maybe 3 workouts in a row that are feeling really bad, that's a good sign that it's worth kind of drilling into. But it's also okay that sometimes things are just not going to feel amazing. And if every single workout that you do always feels amazing, that might mean that you're not actually challenging yourself enough. So just try to remember the rule of thirds and know like, oh, this felt terrible, but maybe that's just going in my not so good bucket and maybe tomorrow's going to be better. And of course, be tracking different things to see what the trends are. But I wouldn't read into a single amazing workout, just like I wouldn't read into a single bad workout either, because most of these are going to fall into those 3 different buckets.
That rings true. Maybe sometimes it's rule of halves.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think then it's like, do you calibrate, right? Do you need to choose something to try to get yourself into the rule of thirds? Because if everything feels bad too, maybe things are a little bit too hard or there's all stuff going on.
No, I think that's really well put. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then I have an extended insight, if you'll indulge me, Elena, because something happened to me the other day that has not happened to me in a long time. And it produced a lot of content, for better or for worse. I wish it didn't happen, but it did produce content. So I have a little ankle injury going on at the moment, and it's not an overuse injury, but basically what happened is I was out trail running, and anyone who spends time on trails on the East Coast in the fall knows that it's really, really treacherous out there come November because there are leaves everywhere. So you can't really see where you're going. You just have to like pray that you don't step into a huge hole and sprain your ankle. But unfortunately, I stepped into a huge hole halfway through a trail run and did sprain my ankle pretty badly. And I kind of roll my ankles all the time when I'm trail running, and usually it hurts for like 5 seconds and then I'm totally fine. But this was a little bit more intense than some of the other ones that I had before. And so, I kind of finished the run, I hobbled out of there, and then it had swelled up a little bit, and I wasn't feeling so great about that. But luckily, I see this great physical therapist, and she went in, she taped it up, and we looked at it, and we said, like, okay, I think you're going to be okay. And so I tested it out. I went for a run a couple days later, and at the very end of the run, I'd been feeling totally fine. And I rounded a corner and like got distracted by something and slammed my ankle just above the point where I'd rolled it into the side of a FedEx box, like a drop box situation. And it really hurt. Like it was a direct blunt force trauma exactly on the ankle that had just been rolled the other day. And from there, it like swelled up to twice its size, and it got crazy bruising, kind of spreading all down my foot, and it was just a total mess. So the reason that I bring up this insight in the context of our spirituality episode is because I think the universe was maybe sending me a signal the first time around that was like, hey, it might be good to take a little bit of a rest. Because honestly, I had been starting to feel a little bit tired. And part of that is because, as we've been talking about, the weather has been amazing this fall on the East Coast in honestly a kind of scary way from a climate change perspective, but it's a lot of beautiful 70, 75-degree days. And so I keep just going out and doing really big things, but I'd felt so much fatigue kind of in my body going in. So I think the universe said like, all right, we're going to roll your ankle and you're going to take a break and it'll be fine. And I didn't really listen. And then the universe placed a FedEx box on the corner of the thing that I was on and forced me into taking a whole bunch of days of rest. So luckily things are feeling a little bit better right now. But I think ultimately I'm actually kind of grateful that this happened because I think I really needed to take a bunch of days off in a row. And I would say I'm definitely feeling less fatigued now, and ankle is a little bit on the mend too.
Amazing. Wow. I mean, so bummed that your ankle got hurt. I mean, we were joking a little before this because I also rolled my ankle. It's just the week of ankle rolls. But I'm with you, the universe is sending you a message, take a break, and good on you for turning it into a positive message.
The whole time I was like, this sucks, but it's all content. I have so much to say on the podcast. And I have 2 more insights from this story. We're going to keep on this spirituality theme. So second one is I just want to validate the fact that there's a lot of feelings around injuries. And again, like this is not something that's hopefully going to take me out for weeks. It really was like a matter of days plus, I would say, that this has been bothering me. But I think I went through every single possible emotion related to this ankle situation that you could. Like, there was, of course, kind of this sadness that this happened because I want to be outside riding my bike. There was a little bit of fear, anxiety about like, oh, did I actually like really mess it up? Is this going to be a chronic thing? There's a little bit of anger where it wasn't actually me that was like, I'm going to take these days off. It was my coach and my physical therapist were like, you're going to take these days off. And I was like, I'm like a little bit mad at you guys for saying that I have to do this. And so all of that was like swirling around in my head, kind of back and forth, back and forth. And then the universe gave me another gift. I didn't tell you this offline, but anyway, I had all these like crazy thoughts swirling and I was like, all right, I'm going to take myself for a little walk, a short one, because of course the ankle. And I happened to be up in Hanover where I coach the Dartmouth team because I was up there coaching. And I embark on this walk, and 5 minutes in the walk, who do I see but our friend Gina, who we have interviewed on this podcast, and we're going to link that episode in the show notes. And she was the best person that I could have run into in that moment because I just walked up to her and she was at the end of her run and she stopped running and we just chatted and walked for a little while. And I felt like it was exactly what I needed in that moment when I was like up, down, angry, like sad, upset, like all these different things, scared, whatever it is. And then she showed up. And one gem that she gave me that I do want to share with anyone who is going through injury and forced to take rest is she was talking about how sometimes it's actually really helpful and freeing from maybe a sort of self-compassion perspective to give ourselves permission to take rest. And I don't think that I'd actually done that. I think I had a little bit of self-talk that was like, you shouldn't have to take this time off. You want to be out there, like, go, 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 go. But as soon as I zoomed out a little bit and said like, okay, I give myself permission to take as much rest as I need to make this better, I felt a lot more at peace about the whole thing. So shout out to Gina. She is a spiritual guide who was sent by the universe to intercept my messy walk. And I was really grateful for that. And so if anyone is struggling with like the whole rest thing, I think just giving yourself permission is actually really, really helpful from a self-talk perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome. Go, Gina. We love that. I'm so glad you ran into her. That sounds lovely. Thanks, Gina.
Thanks, Gina. Yeah. And then my last little insight from all of this is very short, but just want to share that if you take a bunch of rest days in a row, you won't actually die and you may end up feeling really great afterwards. So I talked about how I was a little bit fatigued going into all of this. And then I saw my physical therapist today and she cleared me to start biking and swimming. And hopefully I'll be able to run in about a week. But I felt so good on my bike and so grateful. And I think probably what I needed to get like that energy back and that excitement and just feeling good overall was a bunch of days off. So it was a good thing. And even though I felt all the feels, I know I'm feeling grateful and try to just hold on to that as we let that bruising come down and the swelling come down and get my ankle back to baseline.
Amazing. We love when the universe sends a great message via FedEx.
I love that. It was definitely via FedEx. So anyway, I think this is our segue, right, into our spirituality episode. So again, we are going to caveat the hell out of this whole episode because we are not necessarily spiritual guides, but we think a lot about these issues. And I think that there are some really interesting parallels. So maybe to get us started, Elena, do you want to share why we were even interested in this topic in the first place from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I can share a few thoughts. I don't think anything will come as a massive surprise for anyone who's listened and heard us do all the caveats of like, oh, that's a little woo-woo, but like this might help. I think there's a few reasons why I'm personally fascinated in it. First, I think my brain has always been a little wired to be really philosophic and question a lot and think about like the meaning behind things and why we're doing what we're doing. And of course, because I spend so much time and effort towards my endurance sports, towards being outside, towards this whole pursuit of running or trail running, I have to think a lot about the meaning behind it and why I'm doing it. And I think a lot of that comes back to spirituality for me in many ways. So from a personal perspective, it's always just been like pretty front and center. But then at a more like global or macro level, I think there's been an interesting trend in both a decline in organized religion or involvement in an organized religion, at least within the US, and a growing rise of people into endurance sports in the past few years. And certainly that is no causation. We can't go that far. But I'm really interested in how people have found new places for the things that organized religion did and does provide. I think it's not just endurance sports. Obviously, we're saying it's endurance as a form of this. So this is one aspect of it. But you could look at, the rise of Peloton or these spin classes or any of the boutique fitness. That was like another example of a ton of community and ritual and routine. And there's just so many different ways, I think, to segment how we think about spirituality and religion. And I also think I should be really clear that I am interested in both of these, and they are separate topics, where I feel like religion is more of the order around a belief system, and spirituality is the personal experience or the personal journey through that belief system. And I think they're quite different topics, and they just tend to be really overlapped because, of course, religion is driving you towards spirituality. But I think you can break down those aspects into different pieces, both like I think we'll get into like micro and macro pieces. And that's where I feel like there's a lot of parallels that we could think about for the pursuit of endurance sports. So yeah, I would say the summary there is, personally, I've thought about this a ton, and it's a huge part of how I think about my pursuit of endurance sports and why it's interesting to me. And I think the same thing might ring true at a macro level, and it's just hypothesis, but comes through conversations I have. And that's where I'm curious about exploring what we think and what we see, and then hearing from people in our community similarly how they view this as well. So yeah, that's kind of like the basis. But Katie, I'm curious if it was different for you, or how you approach this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you actually have thought about it in a much more eloquent way than I have. I've just had sort of these like free form floating thoughts, but a couple of those are the idea that I feel like the way that we all get into these sports and spend so much time doing it and find all these values in this sport usually means that there's something spiritual about it. And I think that actually is important, maybe just to zoom out, it's important to be able to even define spirituality. We've been talking about it sort of in these broad ways. And I came across a definition that I think we can use in this endurance context, and that maybe will help us. So I've talked on the podcast before about how I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown. And she has this definition of spirituality in one of her books, The Gifts of Imperfection. I think she also mentions it in Rising Strong. I will link these in the show notes because they're both excellent. But she writes, spirituality is recognizing and celebrating that we are all inextricably connected to each other by power greater than all of us, and that our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in loving passion. Practicing spirituality brings a sense of perspective, meaning, and purpose to our lives. I think especially that last sentence right there, endurance sports can bring a sense of perspective, meaning, and purpose to our lives. And Brene actually leads into how for some people spirituality is organized religion, but for others it can be something like fishing or art, or as we're going to discuss today, those endurance sports. So yeah, when I just think about how I structure my life, there has to be, I think, some sort of spiritual nature to this thing that we do. It's not just a hobby. It's not something that we do for fun, because there is some deeper meaning to it. And I think we sort of share that. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, I love that too. I actually have not gotten into Brene Brown. So,
oh my gosh, that's a whole other podcast. I can talk about all this great stuff I know from Brene Brown. I digress on that.
No, I mean, I really like that. I like that definition a lot, especially like spirituality is recognizing and celebrating that we are all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us. Because it makes me think about like spirituality at its best, and you can think about what's the goal here, and there's enlightenment or meaning or all these different things. I think how it feels at its best is maybe like a sense of awe and connectedness, just exactly what she says, like connected to a bigger power and being kind of in awe of that power. And that is something that I have found most readily and most meaningful in my life through endurance sports. Not necessarily, and to be very clear, not competitiveness necessarily, just even the experiences. And maybe it was the experiences themselves that got me more on the competitive path. And then I have to check in with myself often to be like, if I'm going down this competitive path, does it still achieve those goals? Or if it's not achieving those goals, how am I still making sure that I'm doing the things that are getting me there? And so it ends up being a lot more personal of like how I'm thinking about getting to that like spirituality at its best. But to be very clear, I think you could say this for both religion and spirituality, that it can manifest in amazing ways and it can manifest in not so great ways, just as we've talked about many times with endurance sports, where at its best, I think it's like all these wonderful things of having us feel connected to our community and believing in ourselves and finding meaning and creating structure. But at its worst, it can also be something that's like very draining and filling you with anxiety and guilt and judgment, and maybe like making those parallels really clear and understanding how we approach mentally those goals and being very clear what we're trying to get out of it can help us both achieve the meaning that we want to develop in our lives, but maybe also get us towards those endurance goals as well. I mean, now we're getting too like maybe crazy. I should maybe backtrack on that a little bit, but
no, I like it. I think we're going in literally any direction here, and it's important in the ways that we talk about how endurance is good from a spirituality perspective. I think it can also be a challenge, just like elements of organized religion can be a challenge, etc. So I think we should keep that. We should hold both of those things being true as we kick off this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at a more tangible level, I find a really interesting parallel from how I experience as a coach getting other people involved in endurance sports, where I think if I really think about my goal as a coach, it's like helping people to develop their own feel for what is right for them from a training perspective. We talk about that a lot, like take the extra rest day if you feel it. Like we might say you have something on the calendar, but like if you're not feeling it, maybe you should learn to take the extra rest day. That is something that's like, it seems so simple, but it's not. I mean, like we're coaches and we're talking about how it was hard, Katie, for you to take a couple rest days after your ankle roll. Like it's something that's not that easy. And to me, that's like such a clear parallel between how I think about religion and spirituality, where I feel like organized religion, again, not across the board, but organized religion can often be something that's like very much following the rules, and you follow the structure because you are potentially getting towards that spiritual goal. But that's not necessarily always the case. Like there might be times where you have to question something to make it fit more for yourself than within the existing order. Whereas I view like the ideal enlightened path is like you can make the decision for yourself and weigh the trade-offs really well. And is that a lot more mentally taxing? Yes, for sure, because it doesn't fit within a very clear box. It's not following the exact training plan, but hopefully you find actually more fulfillment and meaning and have a net more positive outcome from that. And so I've thought about that as a coach of like, am I being someone's mini endurance spiritual guide here? But that's why I think we talk about spirituality so much as coaches, because it comes up a lot.
That's so hard too. And thinking about like, what is the right balance of, you need some structure, right? If someone knows absolutely nothing about how to train for a marathon, you need to give them some level of structure. But then you also need to give this broader advice of like, yeah, well, it's not exactly this. And I think for a brand new person, it is hard to be able to say like, well, how much leeway should I take in following this enlightened journey or not? And I don't know, I mean, I imagine that there's quite a learning curve if you're going to adopt any new belief system or step into any new organized religion or whatever it is. It's more just getting those reps in and then starting to figure out like, what are the elements of this that resonate the most for me and what can I leave behind? I don't know. I think any form of spirituality should be a little bit a la carte in that way, in that you can pick out the pieces that are helpful to you and then you can drop the ones that aren't. And I think we even see, I have many athletes who don't actually love racing that much. They're in it for so many other reasons, and maybe we'll pick a race here or there just in order to sort of organize their training plan. But in general, that's not really what it's about. And so I like the idea that there can be a lot of flexibility in kind of following this journey. And that takes us away from some level of organized religion or other organized forms of a spiritual experience that I think don't have as much leeway for each individual person.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where you can kind of get into like, well, to the a la carte perspective. Maybe the framework is there are a certain number of micro things that you think are serving you towards your macro goals. And there are some things that you take that help you in that. And there are some things that you take that don't help you in that. And maybe those things change depending on your journey. And I think you could say, you could make that framework very clear for being an endurance athlete as you can for a broader spiritual lens. And again, you could do that with a bajillion things. I think you could do that with like how you think about your job or how you think about your family or whatnot. Maybe I should say like endurance, I think, is so powerful for that as a vehicle because it's a very unique situation where you have such a personal experience. Like you are doing the thing on your own, but you are not isolated in doing that thing because you are surrounded by a community of people who are also pursuing the same things, that you have community around it. Maybe you have a coach. It's more of a joint journey, but still the experience is very personal. And that's not always the case. And it can be hard to isolate the pieces that are working for you and that are not working for you when you're in a broader environment where things are told to you in a explicitly organized context.
Yeah. And I think this is actually a really nice segue into this next part where we wanted to talk a little bit about these micro level aspects of endurance that have parallels to both religion and spirituality. You talked about community, so that's one of them, but maybe we can kind of drill through these and just talk about how we pull out different themes that are useful to us. The first one on our list here is rituals, which I think are such a huge part of really any spiritual practice. It doesn't have to be organized religion. It can be, if your spirituality thing is art or fishing or whatever it is, or endurance sports of any sort. I think we all have rituals, and we might not even realize what those rituals are, but think about the things that you always do. For example, before you go for a run, after you go for a run, when you're getting ready for your bike ride, when you're getting ready for your triathlon, that like transition setup, that race morning, all of that, or thinking like, okay, I'm going to like wear my lucky sports bra, and this is the thing that I do the day before. And when it gets hard, I count in this way. I think there are rituals pretty much everywhere with that. And I think that gives us a sense of groundedness to the activity that we're doing because it's repetitive, because we know what to expect. the way that we approach our sport is never just like random free for all every single day, because I think that would just be frustrating and it wouldn't feel grounding. So I don't know. I love a lot of the rituals that I've set up, and there's probably many that I'm not even fully aware of just because I do them naturally pretty much every time I go out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And those rituals are things that you've developed that work for you. And I think they parallel, or that they're tied in so tightly with just the idea of structure. And I know that like when I am not training, I hate the lack of structure that creates in my life. And not to say that I have to have everything structured, like I'm going out and hitting my training plan exactly as it's written. It's more just that knowing that, hey, this is my time of the day where I'm going to go do this for myself. And if I'm injured and I can't do that, then it's like, what do I do with that time in my day?
It's funny that you say that, actually, just because my rest days this weekend were like a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday, and I'd planned that I was going to do all these elaborate bike rides and trail runs. And I literally like sat and looked at my calendar and I was like, what do I do with the day? And it was hard. And I ended up filling it with like a bunch of other things that ended up being a nice weekend. But you're so right that especially for most of us that are used to moving our bodies every single day, if you pull that rug out, you're just like, whoa, how do I even structure that kind of time? And it makes us lose a little bit of a sense of like ourselves and what we do. And I think for me, the lesson was like, I need to have other things that are not just like the sport that I look forward to. And maybe on work days, I do have that. But I think it's also okay to ground in like, hey, this is part of what I do on a daily basis. And I like doing that because it makes me feel like I'm in structure.
Yeah, totally. And you think about like structure too. Why does structure feel good? Because I think realistically, like we do have limited mental bandwidth and emotional bandwidth, and spending all that time on decision-making energy of what we should and shouldn't do at every time is exhausting. And it can also be a scary place to be. And so I think that's also why, you know, a lot of people, when they're training for their first thing, it makes perfect sense. You want to get on a training plan, want to have some guidance. I don't want to think about all these different things and worry about if I'm doing too much or too little, because I just want someone to tell me what to do. And similarly with religion, I think that's like the same thing. I just want someone to tell me what's right or what's wrong, so I don't have to worry all the time if I'm being a good person or not. And it just makes me feel better, and it takes that stress out of my life. And I totally get that. And there's a reason why organized religion is so powerful and so strong in those cases. And I think it has a lot of forces for good. It just is then potentially also limiting for getting past that point of like, well, how do I actually figure out for myself if I'm a good or a bad person without someone telling me if I'm following this exact structure and these rituals that I am or am I not? And similarly, as an endurance athlete, like how do I know that we talked about this enough as a person if I'm not necessarily hitting my training perfectly every day? And I think these are just really complex topics that are interesting to grapple with. Not that there's an answer, but that's why I see so much parallel in how we think about like these micro things as simple as, are you hitting your training plan today, against like, am I a good person or not?
Yeah. And it almost becomes paradoxical in that initially getting into the sport and finding that structure, like there has to be a little bit of a very structured approach at first, I think, just like we were talking about, where if you don't know anything about a sport, you're going to need to follow some level of structure with a little bit less flexibility. But then at a certain point, I think that structure can actually unravel us a little bit and take us further away from the true self-discovery of like, what is it that I need on this given day? What is the right modification? How do I listen to my body and be in tune with what it is telling me? And I don't really know where that line lives. Like, how do you get enough expertise to be able to do that? And then how do you take a step back from the structure once you've developed the expertise?
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe the same question. I'll just take a step back because this is also interesting to me, because I think we're coming at some big questions that we talk about a lot that they're all actually so related. And so to me, that question is the same thing we've asked before, like, how do I know when to push myself harder versus not push myself? It's the more simplistic version of that, but it's basically the same idea. And I think to your point, like you need the structure to a certain extent, and you could take it the other side where like spirituality at its worst is entirely undirected, and you can easily become a little bit like nihilistic of like, well, if this doesn't matter, nothing really matters, like that I have no guide and nothing's pulling me back to earth and I don't feel grounded in anything. And that's also super dangerous. And that's at its worst, right? So there is a balance that's totally necessary in this case. And perhaps also that's why I find the pursuit of endurance sports to be a grounding force there, because you do need to have a certain kind of structure. Like, you know that if you don't go hit your long run, that if you can't build up to running 10 miles, then you probably can't go run your marathon. So like there are some very clear like X follows Y examples that I think keep people pretty grounded while still working through, okay, why am I doing this? Why? Like, it's such a silly thing to run 26.2 miles. That is an arbitrary number. Why did we pick that? I mean, I know it was grounded in the battle of for marathon and Athens, and the guy by Divides ran it and whatever. But like he could easily could have run 28.3 miles. And then we'd all be running 28.3 miles. Like regardless, what we're doing is objectively silly. But if you take that expanded framework, anything that we're doing could be seen as objectively silly because we're all just trying to create meaning out of this. So it becomes accepting that structure and owning that structure and being okay with that structure, but also letting that structure slide when it needs to. And that is like maybe the great existential challenge of our lives.
I love that. I'm just going to give you a round of applause for the no, but it's exactly right. And I think this actually leads to a natural question that I wanted to ask you and maybe put you on the spot in a little bit is like, do you feel like there was a point in your endurance journey where, you know, you had enough expertise with doing this to be able to say like, okay, I know, and I can listen to my body? Or do you feel like, I know you came into running a little bit kind of when you needed a break from the structure of hockey and a varsity sport that was running, it was all sort of fun and maybe more spiritual. So maybe we could just talk a little bit about our own experience with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't have it figured out by any means. I mean, I went through a rough summer and I found that to be very tough on me spiritually. And it's not like I had it all figured out to be like, okay, it's fine. But I think maybe part of that was, and I also weigh this concern, might seem out of context, but I'll make like a maybe controversial statement that potentially like more competitive, elite focused athletes might struggle more with the spiritual side of the endurance sport than recreational athletes. And I think I resonate with that because I got into endurance sports through mountaineering and climbing mountains at whatever pace made sense to climb the mountain and seeing beautiful things and being out there for a while and doing it with a group of people because you can't be solo on a team usually, especially in some of these mountains. And that was entirely a spiritual experience for me. And then I got into running and it was just an extension of that. And then I was like, maybe another way to practice like that self-discipline and that belief, which I also feel are very associated with spirituality. So that did lead me more into the competitive side. But I play this constant balancing act of, okay, I'm trying to push towards these goals, but are these goals serving the broader purpose of helping me be what I would consider, based on my own frameworks when I'm learning, a better person? And I'm not always sure that's the case. I think like this past summer when I wasn't feeling that good and I was really hard on myself, that did not make me a very good person because I kind of recoiled into myself when in reality, from a different perspective, I could have been like at a much higher level, hey, this is going to be fine. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to be stronger for it, which I didn't believe in different instances, but it was not maybe like the overall narrative of the time. So all of that is to say, I don't think there was a certain time where it was so obvious to me that like I'm using this as a spiritual development tool. In fact, perhaps my goals have changed enough over time where I come in and out of it. But I think that because I've had this experience with it early on, it's always been a grounding framework for me to come back to. And I think that's important. Like, I am never going to sit here and purport that I know it all and that I feel good about everything I'm doing. And clearly we're having a conversation where I'm like just weighing these things out here. But I think having the framework and weighing it is the meaning, is the journey itself. The meaning isn't coming from something else. It's the meaning is coming from grappling with this all the time. And is that exhausting sometimes? Yeah. So do I not do it sometimes? Yeah, I can't do that all the time, but I will do it when I need to. And I think that will help me get back on the right path. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. And it sounds to me basically that endurance for you is constantly having to engage in self-reflection, like whether it's in a racing context, whether it's in like just a training context, a mountaineering context, whatever you're going out to do, you have to ask yourself these questions. And I do think that constant self-reflection is a huge part of spirituality if the eventual journey is some sort of inner peace or clarity or enlightenment. And so putting yourself in situations where you have to grapple with these questions on a very micro level, like within the interval of your run workout, to this like sort of slightly bigger level that's like I'm structuring my week, then I'm structuring my season, then I'm structuring my year, then I'm deciding if I want to be a pro or if I just want to like go out and mountaineer for fun. All of those things, you're constantly having to have that conversation. And I think I have that conversation a lot too. And I think about actually how the most spiritual endurance things that I do are trail running, which is on a quick hiatus because of my specific goal right now, but trail running and gravel biking, where honestly, pace doesn't matter, power doesn't matter. Like I have no real goals. I don't mind stopping to take a picture, whatever it is. And I do that for about half the year. And the other half of the year, I'm really serious about my training plan. And I am on my bike trainer and I'm on the track and I'm doing all these things that, you know, create challenges and I overcome them and this and that, but it's not the same spiritual experience, I don't think, as what I have when I'm just kind of out in the woods. And yet at the end of 6 months of an off season where I'm just kind of out in the woods all the time, I do get this pull where I want to find something bigger and maybe put myself in more situations where I have to push myself and figure out, what are my limits, and what do I want to work on and self-improve and all of that. So I don't know. It's a similar struggle, I would say, in my head, like back and forth all of the time. And I think at any level, people still probably, as soon as you just get above the threshold of like, I finished my first thing, I think everybody starts to do that. And that goes back to our point in the self-belief episode, how sometimes your belief in yourself is highest when you're brand new at something. And then as soon as you get more into it, I think just these spiritual questions get a lot more complicated.
Yeah. First off, commend you on making what I said sound so much clearer for yourself. Like, get that self-reflection. You're right. It is. It's a constant journey. It's
I'm looking down and I saw a buzzword. I was like, oh, that is the self-reflection do it.
No, totally. I think that I think you're totally right. And that resonates with like how you structure your season, right? Of like, you have that balance. And maybe I think I've thought about that before, like on an existential level, is like the pursuit of the balance is the thing, and that balance changes. And so there's never a point where you're like, cool, I've made it. And that's kind of the point. But maybe it's like the endurance sport, at least for me, is like what resonated most for my self-expression and my form of self-reflection. And also it gives me these other things that make me personally feel more connected to a larger thing, which whether that be being in nature or having community where people are all about self-belief and pumping each other up because we have to if we're going to do these things, or even having this adversity, right? And having that self-belief to push through it, which I think is something that like organized religion typically has done really well, is come to people's aid when things aren't going well. And I think that's what I've thought about the piece missing for me is like when religion is at its best is like also very service oriented, right? And sometimes it can feel like a very individual pursuit. But that's where if you have the community and you're like there cheerleading each other, that can feel really meaningful. But then maybe it's also where I think coaching and some of this reflection and this chatting goes in. It's like I've found such meaning in it that it makes it more meaningful for me to try to give back through this mechanism because I've seen that work. Is that the only mechanism through which I could have given back? Definitely not. But is it the mechanism through which I feel I'm most personally primed to give back because I understand it? Yeah, it probably is. It kind of goes back to like what that other argument, that effective altruism of like how do you give back in the most effective way? And for most people, it's just make a ton of money and then you can give all that money away, which would be sweet. And I totally get that too. I'm not like dishing on that. But if I think about what's the most effective way for me to like give back my energy and my time, I currently view it through this lens because it's where I've had the most personal experience. So yeah, I don't know, Katie, how you think about that with like coaching and why you're drawn to this too. I hesitate sometimes I think in the past I've been like, I don't want to have too much of my meaning tied up in this one thing, but I don't view it as just one thing. I view it as many different buckets that are all tied together by a similar thread. And I didn't always view it as that way. So I'm curious how you think about that too.
Yeah, I try to view it as different buckets, where coaching for me is a very different bucket from my relationship with racing and my relationship with spending time on trails and my relationship with, I do some volunteering that's associated with running specifically, like all of that. And then I coach the urban team. Like there's all these different buckets that I think try to fill different niches, but they are sort of united maybe by this shared activity. But I think if you take away, like the shared activity is like running, biking, swimming, etc. But honestly, the meaning that I get from all those different domains is different enough that I think those things make it importantly distinct, where like the fact that it's a running motion with my body or whatever doesn't actually matter as much. And for coaching, like, I mean, sometimes it's a running motion with my body, but usually I'm just on my computer, like building training plans and setting people pump up confidence. So I think my sense is that for me, it is okay. I think maybe to your point earlier about like the professional athlete lens, I think there you are just focused on your singular thing, which is winning races or going to the Olympics or whatever that is, getting a pro deal, etc. I think all of that might be harder to spread the buckets because you have to go all in. And so there, I think maybe it does become a little bit more of that career angle than the spirituality angle, which I imagine would be challenging. And then the second point I was thinking about as you were talking about community is that I think there's something to be said for knowing that other people who do the same thing that you do probably have some similar values to your values, and it instantly creates a connection that feels, I mean, all of us are like on this planet because we want connection. That's all that we know. That's all that we need. We are a social species. We need that type of thing. And I think thinking of endurance as a lens through which we can find connection is also really, really powerful. And I always am like, wow, we've talked about this before, how you can meet a new friend and go for a run and you feel like you're best friends by the end of that. Whereas if you meet someone else like at work or getting coffee, it's not exactly that same instant connection here. But I don't know. It's like, hey, I see you. Like we share values just by the fact that we're doing this thing together. And so I think there's a piece of the spirituality that comes from connection as well that we can think carefully about. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think I'd overlooked that explicitly when thinking about this topic, but it's so true. It's like just the power of being with people with shared values, right? And it's totally true. I feel like I go out on a new trail run with a new friend and it's instant. Like the guard is dropped. You can talk about anything. It's really natural. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of it as well. It's like add contrast too, because I feel like the other lens in which people think about spirituality in endurance sport is like the self-discipline, self-mastery angle, which I think is very intertwined with, you can think about like Buddhism or meditation, of this idea of like you're taming your mind. And, Eliud Kipchoge is very famous for saying only the self-disciplined are free. He's a famous world record marathoner and he's a professional, and he thinks about this in terms of like more self-mastery, self-spirituality, which is much more isolated from the community side, but potentially there are parallels that you can make between them, where if you are in control of yourself and how you think, then maybe you're able to operate as your best self and show up for other people. That's maybe like a big stretch of if, but I think that would be like maybe the angle there. But I struggle to go down that line entirely just because it can feel more selfish to go down the path of like just focused on self-mastery, but I do like it from the perspective of, hey, if I can really understand myself well and really know myself well and be in control of myself, then perhaps I can do the things that fill my cup up the most to make me show up for the people in my lives the best, which that line of thought does make sense to me, which is just another angle, but it's a little bit different from like, okay, you can go the community angle, which I think is super powerful, and you can go the self-development angle, which is also super powerful, and maybe you're kind of doing both at the same time. It kind of depends on what your goals are, I think, through the sport.
Yeah, well, okay, I have 2 points here, and we're about to just blow our minds with full circle back to Brene Brown. But my first point is that I think when we think about like what we do as coaches and the fact that for us, endurance does touch all these different buckets. There's the social piece and there's the coaching piece and there's the training piece. I think there we can see both of these things being held at the same time. We can have this focus on self-mastery maybe within our own sport, but at a certain point, like you can't train for like hundreds and hundreds of hours a week, right? Like you got to spend your hours doing something else. And so I think there is space to, work on self-mastery in your own domain, but then also kind of figure out how you can give back to other people if you can hold those different buckets. Again, I don't know what that looks like maybe at the Kipchoge level. I don't think there's like that many more buckets to go around, but I think they can both exist. And then the Brene Brown piece that I wanted to talk about here is she talks a lot, and this is also from some work, I think, a researcher named Kristen Neff does it, but it's all on the idea of self-compassion, which is something I am working on a lot. And it's interesting because basically their central thesis is that you can only be as compassionate to others as you are compassionate with yourself. And I'd like to think too that if you are working on self-discovery, you are becoming a better coach, a better friend, a better run buddy, whatever that is, because you have a deeper understanding of your own thoughts and emotions. You might have more capacity for empathy. You might have more capacity for supporting other people going through challenging things. So maybe that's how these start to come together a little bit. Like that self-mastery is not just about, I want to be the fastest runner that I can be. It's I want to be the best person that I can be so I can show up for others in the best possible way. Again, like that is actually quite hard to achieve. If you ever struggle with feelings of enoughness, it is a journey for sure, which we could do many episodes probably on that. We've ripped on it a little bit in the past. But I do think that doing that work does land you ultimately in a place where you can show up for other people in an endurance space and also in a life space.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. It's the old, put your mask on before you put someone else's mask on the plane. And I have found that to be true for myself. And I guess maybe to sum up a little bit of where this is for me right now and why it's even top of mind is like, I have found that the self-belief side and the self-work side has actually been so powerful for me because it expands my faith even beyond myself. So it's like, if I think like I can do this hard thing that really scares me, and then I show myself that I can do that really hard thing that scares me, I also have faith that things will work out, that we will get through things, that anyone can get through things, and we will come together as a community. And maybe that's like broad and it's not backed in science, and there's a lot of other work that goes into that, but it's just a broader faith that feels happy and calming and take some of the anxiety out, to bring it all the way back to the beginning of like having the structure and not having to worry about whether or not this is the right or wrong move. I think I just have faith that the universe will work things out, and that I'm kind of like a fish in the sea, and I'll get to where I'm going regardless of what move I make, and it will guide me in the right direction. And I think that has been probably the number one thing that I have gained from endurance sports as a practice of that, of like, hey, this didn't go my way, but it will be fine. Or, hey, I'm going to keep showing up every day and good things will come from it. And I have faith that good things will come from it, whether or not that's like a race win or like me just feeling good as a person. There's like a point to it. So all of that is to say, I think if I'm to sum it up right now, we've talked about a lot of different points and I believe in a lot of that, but even just like on the simplest level, for me being a place for me to show up for myself, I think expands way beyond myself. And I think that's why I enjoy it as a form of spirituality, because it's connecting me to something bigger than myself, which even if it's just belief, and belief is outside of myself and it feels like I'm claiming that belief for myself, then that's great. So.
Yeah. It's honestly like whatever works, whatever gives you belief and meaning is your spiritual practice. And that can be so different for so many people. But I similarly feel like endurance sports are the thing that translates that most naturally for me, and that also creates the most opportunities for me to sort of do some of this self-discovery. It's fun too. I mean, we have a podcast where we get to actively talk about the things that we are processing and learning about ourselves through our athletes, through our coaching, through our own training. It's just this really natural place, I think, to be kind of working through that. And I will say too, the challenges that sports can provide, I think sometimes give us like the spotlight on maybe what our best and worst traits are, right? In a way that does help us understand ourselves a little bit better. And I like that if we can push through those challenges, we can come out the other side and be like, oh, wow, I am getting closer and closer to the person that I want to be. And this feels sort of meta. And this is something for me that's like probably both in and outside of sport, but the idea of like, I'm getting closer, like I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer, I'm getting closer, I'm getting closer, and having the faith that good things will happen. Just like you said, the universe will reward you in various ways. And it might do that in mysterious ways. Like it might mess up your ankle from a FedEx
It might leave a FedEx box on the corner of the road where you don't see it.
But then it might help you realize like, you know what, I was really terrible at taking 3 rest days. And it turned out that I needed to know that like, I was actually still enough. If I took 3 rest days, I would be totally fine. And now I feel more resilient, and now I won't be as scared if that happens next time. And that will be good for all these various reasons. And we have a bunch of insights for the podcast. So all of it goes together, I think, in a really powerful way. And so I'm grateful for that. And yeah, just the opportunity to keep practicing the values that we care the most about and trying to hold true to them because they're coming into focus. I think when you can identify what they are, that's when they're the most actionable and the easiest to act in alignment with those values, because if you don't know what they are, it's like, oh, I don't know. You don't have anything to ground in.
Totally. Yeah. Well said. We covered a lot, man.
Yeah. We were like, I don't know what this is going to be, but I thought it was good. Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Yeah. I mean, for all we know, there's a lot of people that are just, out there climbing the ladder, not even thinking about any of this stuff. And they're like, this is crazy. So maybe if there's only one point of this is maybe just like think a little bit about it and see how it fits into your life.
I know. Sometimes our episodes have advice. The only advice of this episode is just think about it a little bit and also let us know what you're thinking, because we could probably do a pretty good crowdsource episode someday, Spirituality V2, and see what people think about it in the community. So file those things away and let us know, because as we know, the community is a lot wiser than we are, and we would love to hear those perspectives.
Exactly. Well, I love it. Well, thanks for indulging us on that longer tangent of spirituality to make it a full episode. But I think in the realm of spirituality, or just maybe not even spirituality so much as like the self-improvement aspect that we talked about, we have a challenge of the week, which is my first time officially doing a challenge of the week on one of my episodes with Katie. I think I did one before by surprise with you and Jim, and we pulled one out. So Katie, I'll let you take the lead on this so I can make sure I feel good about mine.
Amazing. Okay, well, to go back to our point about structure, don't feel like you have to do this stuff all the time. It's sort of whenever you feel like folding in some type of challenge. Mine should not come as a surprise to anyone, but hey, maybe take more than one rest day in a row and see how you feel, because I will tell you that even if I hadn't messed up my ankle, I think I probably needed a bunch of rest days to just feel excited and good about training again, because I've been doing a lot of volume. So if you've been feeling like you're in a rut, try not 1, but 2 rest days, and you might end up feeling absolutely amazing and do a lot of fun things. There are other fun things to do in those rest days. You might actually enjoy it.
I love that. Yep. People, we love rest days. Well, we don't, but we do.
But we do. And that's spirituality.
Great. Mine is relatively similar, but just do something different than your usual modality or usual routine when it comes to fitness. So if that means that you are only a runner, try going on a bike ride. And if that means that you are typically always doing like a run, bike, swim, throw in a hike as one of your easy days, because Z1 is no different than Z2, to be honest. I mean, I shouldn't say that so explicitly. There are differences, but when you have like an easy day, I think just getting time on feet and really lightly can just feel, 1, really good mentally, and 2, actually have some surprise benefits, because we're not always spending enough time in Z1 anyways. So just do something that's a little different and see how that feels.
I want that. And I would wager that Z1 sometimes is better than Z2. So when people are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to the very top of my Z2 threshold and just be 1 beat below. And I'm like, try 115 heart rate. That could be fun. That could be awesome.
No, I totally agree. And maybe it's definitely for a different episode, but I'm like really thinking very seriously about doing a lot of like backpacking long Z1 as my build up for UTMB, because I just think that actually will serve me much better than doing a bunch of Z2 actually. So it's an experiment.
Let's coordinate offline and do some trips together. We can record from club. That'd be awesome.
Exactly. It would be great. Okay.
Sweet. Okay, let's close it out. Gear pick of the week. This is also related to my ankle, which is the only thing that's on my mind these days besides spirituality. I'm going to recommend rock tape. So this is like a kinesiology tape. My physical therapist, who is amazing, has been putting a lot of rock tape on my ankle, and she had pink rock tape, which was so fun. So it's fashionable and cute, which is really all that. That's the reason that I banged my ankle into the FedEx box, so I could get the pink rock tape. But really nice for just a little bit of extra support. And if you buy it for yourself, there's great like YouTube videos online for like, oh, I have IT band syndrome. This is how you use rock tape for that. Or I have like runner's knee. You know, you can use it for a lot of different things. So even if you don't have access to a physical therapist, I find that it's pretty helpful. Maybe it's placebo, but it looks cool. And I do think it's been giving me a little extra support as I continue to rehab.
Awesome. I have to check that out. I don't know what kind of, is it like very flexible tape? Like KT
yeah,
tape?
Super flexible. Yeah. Like KT tape basically, but it's called rock tape. And the particular kind that I have is pink, which is why I'm excited about it. So
cool. Okay, I'll check it out. Yeah, I use very basic sport tape to tape my ankle like every time I run in a very specific way that I will say actually makes a huge, huge difference. So if anyone's worried about their ankle support, there are YouTube videos for how to tape your ankle. My ankle taping has saved me from multiple ankle rolls, and I'm sure of it. So yeah. Yeah.
Good challenge of the week. Tape your ankles if you're trying.
Tape your ankles. Okay. Mine is, wait, I just realized this is also totally on the ankle train. Oh my gosh. It's called the squid ice compression. I got this several years ago because I have one really bum ankle that was causing me a lot of issues in the past. And I rolled my good ankle recently and I broke it back out from my good ankle, and it's great. It's like this little device that has these custom ice packs. They have specialized wraps they have an ankle wrap, they have a knee wrap, they have an elbow wrap and a wrist wrap. So it depends on what you're using it for. But they basically have these ice packs, you have these wraps, and then it compresses it too. So it's all built into one device. It's just like compress and ice. And I do it religiously when something's not feeling good. And I think it really makes a difference. Just makes everything feel a little more secure. So I'm a fan. Squid ice.
I'm going to add that to my Amazon cart right now, because as we know, the ankles are contagious. There are issues everywhere. And yeah, we want to get those back in business as soon as possible so that we can best continue our spirituality journey. But if that's not what the universe wants, it is okay. We're chill. We're chilling.
Yeah, we're chill. I think that's the summary of the entire episode. We're actually really chill.
I'm like, guys, we're actually really chill.
Do you think anyone would believe that? Oh my gosh.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Awesome. Well, thank you for doing this with me, Elena. It's always so fun and always so spiritual. And yeah, please send us, email us, reach out with your thoughts on spirituality if you have any. And if you haven't before, please consider dropping us a rating or review, and we will see you next time.